Hello. I thought I'd do a couple of stitch with me videos today. This piece is a stitch for all seasons, summer, by Little Dove Designs. It's on a 40 count linen, and I'm using one strand of floss. I thought I'd start with this further out view on this piece. I'll work on several different pieces with different strands of floss, they're all a little different. This one I thought I'd start with one strand of floss. If you want more information on this lap stand, it's the Elan lap stand, and it's in video number 19. I tell you all about it in video number 19. I'll get a closer up view on some other projects, but for this video right here, I wanted to show you some things that you need to be further out to be able to see. So I stitch with one hand. My hand moves back and forth, and my left hand is always on the back right here, guiding. It just stays right there, and it helps guide the needle in and out. And I purposely made my thread really short so I could show you how I start a thread when I'm using just one strand. I'm going to go under 3 or 4 stitches on the back to end this thread. Cut it short. And now I'm going to start a new thread. So I fold the needle. Let's see if I can do this so you can see it. I fold the thread over the needle. And I pull it up. I pull up on it so that thread is nice and tight on that needle, and then I slide the needle out so the thread is just pinched in half right there between my thumb and finger. And then I push the eye of the needle down over that folded thread. If I put it over here, can you see? Oh, there we go. Pushed it over that folded thread, and then I just I have to move backwards, and then I just pull that folded thread through the needle. That's how I thread a needle. We show a better demonstration of it, Catherine and I can't remember what video it is. It's the one right after Catherine shows how Boss Daughter, shows how she works on a HAED. It's the video right after that, because we got a lot of questions about that. So to start my thread with just one strand, so I'm not doing the loop method, I kind of taught myself how to do a different kind of a start, where I'll bring the needle up where I need to go, and then underneath this hand is underneath the fabric, and as the thread is coming up, I run it through my fingers so I can feel it. It's underneath where I can't see it, and I can tell because it's running through several fingers. When I get to the end of the floss, I can feel it right there when I get to the end. So about right there on the back side where I can't see it, I'll hold on to it and kind of hold it on the back like this so that I can stitch the tail in under several stitches. So I'm running the thread through my fingers underneath until I can feel that I'm at the end. Then I'm going to hold that tail on the back with my finger. See if I can show you that maybe. I'm holding that tail with this finger on the back. A lovely view of my arm. All right, while I'm holding that tail on the back, I am going to do start the first 3 stitches of this border. And then I'm going to come back and finish those 3 stitches, but you can see on the back that that tail was caught under those 3 stitches. And then I'll come back across and finish those 3 X's. Sometimes that first stitch right there is a little loose. So I'll turn it over and find that tail and give it a little tug. And that will tighten up that first stitch that I did. Normally I would have my pattern all folded up. Let's see if I have it right here. Hooked with a magnet on right here so I can see it and I don't have to look away from my stitching. I'll stick it right here with this big magnet, but I can't put the pattern there obviously because then I'd be showing the pattern. But normally I have my pattern sitting right here. I think I do my stitches backwards for most people. I start at the bottom right of the square and go to the top left. And if I'm working with a solid color floss in rows, I'll go across doing half of the X to the end of the row, and then I'll come back across the row and finish the X going back this way. You'll be able to see that closer up here in a few minutes. Trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you about this piece. I do always have the bottom of my X going this way, and then the top leg of my X always goes the other way, so like this. So I'm consistent that way, but whether I start at the top of the stitch or the bottom of the stitch as I'm doing just depends on which direction I'm stitching, where I want the thread to end up, how I want the thread to lay. If I want the thread to lay nicer, I might start at the top or the bottom of the stitch. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well, on a piece that you'll be able to see it better. I usually don't carry my thread on the back more than maybe 2 blank spaces because I know it will show through on the fabric. If I'm working on full coverage where I know it's going to be covered up later with stitches, I'll carry my thread on the back like an inch if I know it's going to be covered up. But if I do need to go quite a ways across, Like say I was stitching here right now, but next I'm going to need to stitch with the same color over here. That's too close to really end my, I could end my thread and start my thread over here, but I'm not going to save any thread by doing that. I'll use about the same amount of thread as if I just carried across over to here. But it's not good to have really loose threads hanging on the back, so I would catch a couple of threads on the back as I went over there, just so that thread is anchored down a little bit. And then I would come up over here, if that's what I needed to do. Thread my needle again. Oh, I have a knot. See if we can pull it out. There we go. This border you can see right here is going to be filled in above here with this darker green. So I'm not concerned that I'm just carrying my thread on the back from the top of each little triangle down to the bottom of the next. It's not going to show. All right, now that you could see where my upper hand and lower hand are, let's see if we can get a little closer. So you can see this. Oh, now you're rocking back and forth. Now you're all seasick. At a weird camera, weird angle, because I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera and now I can't see what I'm doing. All right, let's switch to a different project. This is Cricut Collection Summer. It's on 32 count Lilac by Weeks, and I'm using 2 strands of thread. When I use 2 strands, I do the railroad method to help separate the strands so that they don't get twisted up, so they lay nicer. I don't do it on this first leg as I go across, the first leg of the X. So let me get to the end here where I'm going to turn and come back. So on my way back, when I'm doing the top leg of the X, I'm going to put my needle between the two strands before I go down into the stitch. I separate the two strands with my needle and then go down. But I only do that on the top leg because I just don't want to take the time to do it on the bottom leg, and the bottom leg doesn't show as much. It just makes the threads lay nicely. Sometimes, let me just show you an example. If you're working in, I'm not going to railroad these stitches just because I'm showing you something else. Sometimes when you have several rows of the same color and they have a hard edge right here, like this one does, they all start in the same place. Just do rows of 3. And then you do the next row. I'm not railroading these because it's a demonstration. I just want to show you something real quick. And I'll just do one more row. Sometimes when you do a row like that where they all start in the same place, this first stitch all the way down will lay funny. Like you'll have it's almost like there's a ridge on those stitches all the way down. They don't look the same as the rest of them in the row. And it's because of the way the thread is pulling. When you do that last stitch, the back of the thread on the back is pulling from here to here. The way I stitch, I would end here and then I would start the next row right here. So it's pulling this thread down. Normally as you're coming across, it would go down to that next stitch and down and down. So it's just pulling funny because you're going to a different place at the end of every row. So sometimes if I see that happening, I would do every other row, I would start it differently so I didn't get that ridge. If you don't get a ridge, then don't worry about it. Threading my needle again, fold it over, pull the needle out, push the eye over that folded piece of thread. Sometimes I will skip that first stitch and I'll go across and do however long the row is. And then I'll do that last stitch on my way back. And I'll just do that on every other row. This row I'd start right here like normal, but the next row I would start in one and do that stitch when I got back. And it would just make this thread pull differently as it went down to the next row so that you don't get that ridge. Or any time that you're stitching, you know, you're doing it a funny way because you're doing a long vertical row, or you need to do one little stitch out here and then move over there, so the thread pulls funny and it makes your X look really strange. Like it's just not looking like the rest of them. Try either starting at the top or the bottom of that stitch so that it will pull differently on the way to the next stitch so that it will look nicely. I will pull those out because those were just demonstration stitches, but I just wanted to show you how I stitch with 2 strands. And if I was starting a thread, with 2 strands, when I'm separating a thread from the rest, you just get a hold of one of these at the top. My goodness. Hold the rest of them in your fingers and just pull that one out. You can see it's just kind of bunching up as it pulls out. Then I put that one down and then I straighten this one back out. I keep mine in floss away bags, so I just wind it around my fingers like that, and then I put it back in the bag. So if I'm using 2 strands, when I start a thread, I'll put the 2 ends together. Put the thread on close to those 2 ends. So at the bottom, I have a loop. I'll just start out here in the middle of nowhere somewhere. So you come up, but not all the way. Then you make that first leg of your X. And then you put your needle through that loop and then pull it tight. You can also do a loop start from the front. You don't even have to turn it over and do it from the back. And then you just keep stitching. All right, let's change to a different project. This is Little Snowy Green Cottage by Nora Corbett. I'm stitching it on some 32 count linen. And this color I'm using on this tree right here is this beautiful Water Lilies Jade. It's an overdyed silk. You can see how it has light greens and dark greens in it. If I'm using overdyed colors, 2 strands or 1 strand, but especially 2 strands, I like the variegation. This is a bit long, but okay. I want to see all the lights and all the darks. I don't want them to get mixed up together. So when I'm pulling my 2 strands, it's because I'm going to start a new thread, I would pull 1 thread out and I'm going to carefully lay it over my stitching with the top end at the top. Then I'm going to pull out another one and carefully lay it next to it with the top end at the top and let the bottom dangle. Then I'll straighten these out and put them away. And then I'll carefully pick up these 2 strands so that the 2 tops are together where it started with that light green. And the 2 bottoms are together when it went down to that kind of a fern green. I don't want to get the top and the bottom mixed up between these 2 because I want the colors to stay together. And then I would thread my needle and start with it. But I already have some thread on my needle. And I want the lights and the darks to show up. Let me look at my pattern, see what I'm doing on this row. The next row is exactly the same. I'm going to cross each X as I go. I do railroad, so I will put my needle between the 2 strands before I put it back down in the fabric on that top leg. But I'm going to cross each X as I go so that those colors, those lights and darks, stay together. If I went across doing one leg and then came back and finished the other leg like I was stitching before, it will mix the colors up, makes them muddier, or some people call it a heather look. And if you like that heather look, then definitely stitch it that way. To do whatever you like. But if you want to really see all those lights and darks, then you need to stitch each X, both legs of each X as you go. Hopefully you can see that. If I was using 1 strand of overdyed, I would stitch the same way, cross each X as I go. And you also can't do the loops. If you want the lights and darks to stay separated from each other, then you can't do the loop start when you're using 2 strands, because that means you're folding the thread in half, and then the lights and the darks are going to all be mixed up from each other. So if you're doing the 2 strands with variegated floss and you want the variegation to stay lights and darks separated, then you need to just lay the 2 out like I showed, and then start it where you hold the tail on the back for the first few stitches. Because you can't, if you fold it in half, you'll lose it'll mix up all your color variations. It'll mix them together, which is fine. I mean, I know people who love the loop start. They like the look of the variegated floss, kind of a tweed look where it's mixed together. And so they stitch that way on purpose. It just would be whatever look you're looking for. In these trees, I really like seeing the lights and the darks. So I did not do a loop start. This going back and forth in rows like this is going to make it a stripy tree. It's going to have horizontal stripes as it goes up. You could do vertical rows if you wanted the stripes to go vertically, or you could go just randomly around and fill in as you go. If you wanted the colors to look more random, you could do squares of 4 or 3, 6, 9. You could do squares of 3, 3, and 3, and then do 3, 3, and 3, and then do 3, 3, and 3, so that you kind of had spots of color, little squares of color, if you didn't like the stripy look. This is a scissor block that my dad, there we go, made for me. It's like a knife block. You can see how it has a slanted top. It's on an angle. It will hold 6 pairs of scissors. It sits on my table right here. You can probably hear me putting my scissors in and out of it. right, let's switch pieces. And the last piece I'm going to work on is going to be a full coverage Heaven and Earth design. This is a Heaven and Earth design called 4 Seasons. I am doing the mini version, not the full-sized version. That's what it looks like when it will be finished. So when I do full coverage type designs, like a Heaven and Earth design, I know you can see the pattern over here on Pattern Keeper. I do use Pattern Keeper app on a tablet, but I don't think you'll be able to figure out anything from that. In fact, I can zoom in even more. So I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm not gonna worry about that. When I stitch full coverage, I stitch in vertical rows. I start at the top of this row and I stitch down. This is these 10 stitches across, 10 inches down blocks. I'll stitch down that 10-inch wide, 10 stitch wide block all the way to the bottom of the piece with those same threads. Then I'll start more threads up here for the next column and then come down. So each column has its own threads. So you'll see there's threads over here that are going to go down in these columns. There's threads across here that are going to come down in these columns. So even though 3363 might be used here and here, I'm going to have 2 separate threads, one doing the 3363 in this column and one coming down doing the 3363 in this column. There are a million different ways to stitch full coverage Heaven and Earth designs. There's a diagonal method. Some people don't like this vertical columns method because they think it leaves marks in the stitching where you can see the edges of those rows. I have never had a problem with that when I'm stitching mine. I do have a really tight tension. I don't know if that makes a difference, but have never been able to see it in mine. And I did see it once when I turned it just a certain direction, but that does not bother me. It's going to be in a frame on the wall. The chance that someone's going to see it at just that right angle doesn't bother me. So I don't worry about that. If that does concern you, you can do, there's a diagonal method where they do squares, 10 by 10 squares, but in a diagonal shape. There's one where you feather the edges as you go down instead of having a straight edge. There's lots of different ways. I'm just going to show you today how I do it. If you want to see how my daughter Catherine does it, Boss Daughter, she made a video years ago. It is video number 12. If you want to see how she stitches, because we're slightly different from each other, go watch video number 12. And if you want to, I went and looked to see if you want to see the tutorial where we show how to thread a needle, only we use yarn and a great big needle so you can see it better. That's video number 13. All right, so I'm working down. I use a Dritz air and water soluble ink pen to mark my grids. I just mark the intersections of those 10 by 10 blocks in the area that I'm going to be working on that day. And then after 2 or 3 hours, depending on whether it's summer or winter and how humid it is, those marks will disappear. I have had some people comment and say that sometimes those marks don't. There have people who had a problem with these marks not going away, but most of the time they're under stitching where they would never show anyway, and I've never had a problem with it, so that's how I do my gridding. So you can see that I'm working down this column right now. Normally I have these threads are parked. I use the parking method. Oh, and these bobbins that are keeping my thread organized. This plastic bobbin is called a Bob Ease, E-E-Z, Bob Ease bobbin. You can buy them on Amazon. My daughter-in-law Hannah has an Etsy shop called Sunshine Mama's Designs, and she takes these bobbins and glues a magnet to the back of them, a set of magnets so that you can magnet it to your project, and puts a cute button on the front. like this lady, oh, you can't see it, this ladybug and this squirrel. This one was one I made. It doesn't have a button on it. So if you're interested in buying these parking bobbins, they pop. They're plastic. They pop open so you can wind the fabric around, the thread around them, and then you pop it closed. And it keeps them organized. So her shop is Sunshine Mama's Designs on Etsy. So I'm working in this column going down. Usually when I sit down to work on a full coverage piece, I would work on 3 or 4 blocks all at once. Today I'm only going to work on 1 block because you don't want to sit here and watch me stitch for 3 hours. But normally I would work on 4 at a time. If I was, well, first I'll show you. So since I'm only working on this 10 by 10 block right here, I'm going to take all the threads that are parked in these threads are all parked in that 10 by 10 square. So I'm just going to pick up these threads and I'm going to flip it over the top of my piece just so they'll stay up like that. And these ones that are not in that 10 by 10 block are just going to be down and out of the way. If I was working on 3 or 4 blocks like I would normally do, I would take all of these threads and flip them all up. Sorry, my battery died and I had to go find a power cord. Okay, back to what we were talking about. Since I'm only doing this 10 by 10 square right here, I'm going to separate these threads, get these ones that are parked in that 10 by 10 square, and then flip these threads up over the top so they're out of my way. And this one's in the one next to it, so it's not either. Not included here. So the first thing I do when I already have parked threads in the way is that I start with the bottom one, the one that's clear down here at the bottom. Because it's parked clear down here at the bottom, I know that there are no stitches up in here, up higher in the square. This color is not used up here. If it was, it would be parked up higher. Because it's parked clear down here, this is the first place that it's used. So I start with the bottom thread so that these threads are not in my way. All right, so we will put the needle on that thread. And looking at my marks, it is parked. I count up diagonal from the corner. 1, 2, 1, 2. So if I go over here to my pattern keeper, oh. My goodness, the problems we're having today. No, you're not going to be able to see it no matter what I do. Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2. Should be that square right there, which Pattern Keeper is telling me is 3031. And I happen to know that 3031 is a brown color, very similar to that, so I'm pretty sure that is 3031. If I was worried, if it was like purple or something, and I was thinking, no, I think 3031 is a brown, then I would just start pulling bobbins out of my bobbin box and compare it until I found what color it really was. Like, you can just start pulling out all the browns. This is a 975. No, it's definitely not that one. Until I found the right one. Oh, yep, that is 3031. If I ever am concerned that it's the wrong color, but 99% of the time it's the right color because I'm careful about where I parked it. All right, so the only place that this color is used in this entire 10 by 10 block is this one stitch. So I will stitch that stitch, and I'm going to look and see where it's used next, below in that same column. It is not used anywhere else in this column. Looking on Pattern Keeper, I can see that. So I am going to end this thread. Well, I'll look and see if it's used in the column next to it, over here, or over here maybe. It is used in this, no, in this, nope, this one. It is used in this square. So I am gonna park it. It doesn't look like there's another thread parked. There's not another 30-31 over here that's gonna come down. So I'm gonna park it right there. Let's see if I can show you that. Complicated. Oh my goodness sakes. Okay, so this is the stitch I just made. The only other place it's used is right here. So I'm going to start at the count corner and count down 1, 2, 3, 4 diagonally and then down 1. So I'm going to go, it's in this square right here. So I'm going to start at the corner and go 1, 2, 3, 4 and then down 1, and I'm going to park it right there. I always stitch from the bottom right hand corner up to the top left hand corner. That's just how I stitch. So I'm always going to park this thread in the bottom right hand corner of where it's going to be used next. I just always know that the threads are parked in the bottom right hand corner for me because that's where I start stitching a stitch. So I will park that one there. Move on to the next lowest one, which is this lovely purple color. And I know that it is just 2 stitches above that brown stitch. So looking on Pattern Keeper, that is let me mark off that I did that brown stitch. That is 208. And I know that 208 is a color very similar to that, so I'm just going to assume that that is 208. And I'm going to stitch this stitch. And then it's used again right here. And that's outside of this 10 by 10 block that I'm using, so I will just park the thread right there and drop it. These 2 threads are both on this bottom most furthest down row. So I'm going to choose the one to the right, which is parked in that spot, which is 209, and that does look like 209. Pattern Keeper says that's 209 for that spot. And there is this stitch. And no more of that color in this block. Oh, but it is used. It skips 2 blocks. Oh, the swamp color's on, so my lines are already disappearing. It skips 2 blocks and then it's used 1, 2, 1, 2. That is the next place, that color. See how I carried it from here, clear down to here? I don't care. On a HAED, I'll let you look at the back. It's a rug. I carry threads all over the place. I know that these are all going to be covered up. The only place I would worry is if you had a big section of white, which I am going to have in the middle of this one. So I'm going to have to be really careful not to carry threads across through that back of that white section because they will show up. But I know that all of these are going to get covered up with stitches. So I will just carry them down whatever. You can see how far all of these threads are going down to the next place they're going to be used. How far down I carried them. On a HAED, it's almost like a secret delight in carrying it across the back when I know I'm not supposed to on all my other pieces. Because on a HAED, there are so many different colors and so much confetti stitching that this is just the way I stitch it, and I don't care that there is actually more thread on the back of this project than there is on the front. It doesn't bother me. All right, and I think I better refresh my intersections before they disappear. We don't have central air conditioning in our house. We just have a swamp cooler, which means it blows air through some wet grass pads. And that's what cools the house down. But it makes the house very humid. And my intersections tend to disappear quickly. Especially since I had to go find a power cord. All right. In the wintertime, when it's really dry here, those marks will stay on there for several days before they disappear, because we're at like 1% humidity in the house with the hot air, the heater running. Okay, my next lowest color is this one, furthest down in the square. And on Pattern Keeper, that square says it should be 310, and this does indeed look like black 310. And this black just runs all the way down to the bottom of the block. All right, and the next place it's going to be used is that next stitch right underneath it, so I will park it right there. All right, there are 3 threads parked all in the same row. I'm going to go to this furthest one to my right because it's the most out of the way on that side. Thread it on the needle. And it is 1, 2 in from the corner. Mark off my black stitches. All right, 2 in. That should be this one, which is O2, and that does look like O2. There's one there, one here, one right here, and park it right here because that's the next place it will be used. Mark those off. The next one is just up from that purple stitch. That is 823, and if I was concerned that that was 823 for sure, let me pull it out of there. I can always get 823 out and say, oh, yep, that's 823. And this one is also a little stripe that goes all the way down. Oh, except it does skip a couple. Looks like it goes down 4. Then it skips 1, and then it does 2. And then it's not used anywhere else in that square, and the next place it's going to be used is right there. So I will park it right there. Mark those off. And the lowest color now is that right on the edge? Yep. $160. Sometimes I catch these threads that are laying down and it pulls them up. And I just comb them down again so they'll stay out of the way. I was happily going down in the stripe and didn't realize that it's used over here as well. So I'm just going to come over and catch these. All right, that's all of them. And the next place it will be used is that stitch right below. So I will park it there. Mark those off. Now the ones that are left, I have, looks like 5 colors parked in this very top row of this square. I would start with this one on the right and then I would move over. And then eventually all of these threads that were parked in this square will be stitched in where they go and then parked where, and I won't have anything else, no other threads will be parked in here. But most of the time, all the stitches aren't done yet. Partly because this area of purple flowers is just ending, and this gazebo, this really dark colored blue and green gazebo is just beginning. So there's probably going to be some colors in here that have not been used up here above, and so there's not parked in this square yet. So I always stitch all the parked threads first so that they're out of my way and not bothering me. And if I took the time, I would stitch these 5 in next, and then they'd all be down here below, and there would be nothing up here in my way. So we'll just pretend that I did that. Here is my square on Pattern Keeper. Marked all the ones that I've already stitched, and we'll just pretend that those 5 that are across the top, I stitched them in and marked them off. So now I'm going to look at the spaces that are not marked off yet. Maybe I'll choose this. Let's move over to search mode. Maybe I'll choose this symbol right here. And it says it is 210. Right here, it's highlighting 210 for me. So I need to go get a thread of 210, start it, and I will, I'm pretty sure 210 is already in there. It's one of the ones I didn't stitch yet, but we'll just pretend that it's not in there yet. So I'll pull out a strand of 210 off of my bobbin, thread it on the needle, and I know that I'm going to need to use it about right there. What I like to do is put my finger right there, usually this hand, no, this hand. I'll loosen my knob first, and then I'll put my finger right there where I know it's going to be stitched. Then when I flip it over, I can feel my finger and I know, oh, it needs to start about right there. So I'll just take my needle and go under. There's usually a bunch of stitches nearby somewhere that I can go under a little ways. Try not to catch the fabric, just the flosses. Pull it so the tail is almost through, and then I'll go right here where the thread comes out. I'll go under, like, I'll go back and go under that last little bit again, and that anchors the thread on the back. Where there's so much stitching back here, it's usually really easy to anchor the thread somewhere near where you're stitching. And then I would just come up in the square where that Pattern Keeper is telling me that stitch is supposed to be right here, and then I would keep using that thread and park it in the next place. If it wasn't used in the next square and anywhere nearby, then I would just flip it over like I did before, run it under some stitches, and cut it off. I am just going to cut this one off. To start a HAED, or if you're up here starting, for me, up here, if I'm starting a new column, like I'm over here on the edge and I need to start a new column, there's no threads in there yet. Or if you're just beginning a HAED over here in this corner, there's no threads parked in there yet because you're just beginning. So what I would do then is I'd look on Pattern Keeper. I'd pick a color that's up near the top right here and has several stitches at least nearby, so that you could hold your tail in the back and hold the tail in so that it gets caught in those first several that you do. Let's see. I can show you an example. So if I was stitching this square right here and there was nothing in there yet, I would choose, this would be a good color to choose that I have highlighted because it has several stitches near each other. I could do like these 3 right here, or these 4 right here, just start right there. Hold my thread on the back, hold that tail and stitch it in and get those started, and then do all the rest of these stitches and then start the next thread the same way. And I would just choose one color at a time in that square, or however many squares I've decided to do in this sitting. And I do all the stitches in that square or those 2 squares, and then I would just park it in the next place that it would be used. So that's how I get started on a column where there's nothing parked yet, or if you're just beginning the very first stitches of a HAED. Hopefully that made sense. And that will be the end of our Stitch With Me session today. Bye-bye.